I'm Sebastian, CEO of Smart IoT. Welcome back to a series on why buying a software development project is so difficult. In our last video, we talked about why it is so difficult to create a requirements document that actually makes sense and holds up. And today we're going to talk about the hidden costs of a software development project and how you can keep your costs or how you can manage a software project to keep costs in balance. Let's start with this. When you think of software development, what costs would you consider? You might think it's like buying a product. It has a sticker price and you're expecting to get a certain result for that sticker price. But software development is more like commissioning an architect. You go to that architect and you essentially ask for a house. But by creating the first floor plan, you're basically setting expectations right then and there. And before that, the architect will not be able to tell you an exact price. Even with the first floor plan, things will change over time. You will add a room, you will probably discuss, do we need more space? Do we need an additional window somewhere? What about that wall? What about that door? Is there enough light in that room? And do we need another bath? And you know what? Once you've discussed that, then materials are another topic. What wooden floors do you want? So why then would you buy software at a fixed price? Reason 1, hidden costs. Think of software development like an iceberg. What you see is actually what's on top. All the bottom, you don't see that. But it's still absolutely necessary. There are things like integrating with other systems. Your software doesn't live in a vacuum. So you probably need to integrate with other software. Because, if you create an IoT device, it probably wants to work with if, then that. Or it needs an MQTT interface to talk to other servers. It might be necessary to integrate with other IoT systems. Testing is another thing. So once we've developed something and we actually tested it before and it went through our quality control, and we made sure it hits the acceptance criteria, you might not have the same reasoning. You might understand acceptance criteria different than we do. So testing on both sides is absolutely necessary, and that will probably lead to more work. Or it might be okay, or you might want to live with the consequences of those misunderstandings. But it's still a very difficult topic that needs to be discussed, and you need to be part of the picture. So you, on your side, need to create budget for your employees to actually test the product while we're developing it. If you wait until the last minute to test a product that we are developing for, let's say, a year, you might not like the results. And it's not because they weren't specified or we didn't want to give you the quality you wanted. It's just because we never knew. And you never knew we didn't know because you didn't test the product along the way. And then let's talk about regression testing. So once you add a feature, so you might think in the middle of the project, I have an absolute fantastic idea, I want to add a feature. And you think, oh, that feature is just 6 additional days. First of all, scope creep. Scope creep might lead to you adding 6 days every week. And that obviously adds 10, 20, 30, 40%, whatever, to your budget. You might not want that, and the people that usually make those decisions are usually not the people that are responsible for the budget, but we'll discuss that later on. But regression testing also means that if I add a feature, I need to retest everything else between releases, because things should not be interconnected, but sometimes it's unavoidable. And sometimes, due to time constraints that you're setting at the beginning of the project, there might be things that are interconnected that in hindsight would have better been separated. Good software companies talk a lot about architecture. They do talk a lot about separating logic from each other, internally at the very least. But that usually costs money because it adds complexity at that moment. It doesn't add complexity over the course of the project, but it adds complexity to that one task. So if you set certain expectations to get something now, and you make a software development team cut corners at the very beginning, you might pay for that later on. Let's talk about scope creep a little bit. Here's the thing about software. Once it comes to life, once you start testing it for the very first time, you're gonna have wishes. You're gonna see like, wow, this is possible, all right, but I really need this then. Or you're like, yeah, I described it that way, but now that I test it, I want it that way. It could be little things, like in your requirements document, you said you need login. And so we created a login with email and password. But then you're testing it out and you're like, everyone else has Google to, log in quickly. Can't we do this too? And the software development team will probably tell you, yeah, it's not a problem. It adds 4 days. Or 3 days, or whatever, I don't know. But that's not all. So you already have a password reset? Perfect. That might change too, then. So the password reset might change too, according to the change you just requested. And that is really difficult to understand sometimes, and this is also not always visible if those changes happen quickly. So whenever you request a new feature, make sure the development team has the time to adjust the overall plan to it. If you just throw in features and you add a timeline at exactly that point, so a sentence like, can we add that? I would like to show that at the next event next week or in 3 weeks or whatever. That sets a certain expectation to that new feature, and that might be beneficial for marketing or sales or whatnot, and it might make all the sense in the world, but you're throwing budget out of the way at that moment. Because at that moment you set expectations, then the development team will react to your wishes really quickly without possibly thinking it through. And then you'll end up with a broken reset, a password reset, which will cost you an additional 3 days later on, which will obviously increase your budget. So let's talk about those little details. In your requirements document, you didn't say that you wanted a Google login. And that's a small change, but that might happen every week. And it might be a lot of details that were overseen. And then involved in the project is not the CEO likely. It's a product manager and a tech person. So that tech person together with the product manager will likely make decisions, but they might not be directly involved with the budgeting. So they will make a bunch of decisions and then they will report back 3-6 months later to their upper management. And their upper management might not be aware of all the little details that changed. And the product manager or the tech guy might not have been aware of the budgeting issues. So it is very, very important for a software development company like ours to be very transparent with scope changes. We report those every 2 weeks in a document. So we actually tell you we've added this ticket and it probably costs that much and it includes that. But what often happens is that the product manager says, well, yeah, we definitely need that. That's kind of unavoidable. And the tech guy is like, yeah, we need that integration. I mean, the product is not going to work without it. But the upper management 6 months later might not have the same view. So it's very important to keep the conversation flowing and to keep the upper management involved in such a project. Another thing is assumptions. So if you get an offer from us, there's a certain assumption of quality, a certain assumption of a feature in there. So if a feature is described in 5 sentences, it's obviously not code. And the only thing that is valid afterwards is the finished product. I mean, that really describes all the little things. 5 sentences are never gonna do that. Maybe even 5 pages are not gonna be enough. Maybe 50. I've had product specifications of a couple hundred pages for seemingly small products, and they ended up being completely misunderstood. I was on the other side of the fence once too. And that is usually not understandable by either party. And that is exactly the assumption thing. So we try to handle that by delivering to our customers every 2 weeks. And we expect our customers to actually test what we give them and to review it carefully. Because assumptions are really difficult in projects. We're going to make assumptions based on what you're saying, based on what you're writing, based on what you specify. And you're going to make assumptions too. And having different assumptions behind those words is a major concern in software projects. And then I've said it before, but I really want to make this clear. If you buy a software for a fixed price, you're gonna get the minimum quality that a software team is gonna get away with. Let that thing sink in. So you buy an app and you tell me I want to do this for X dollars. So there are two possibilities there. I cut features, that is one, or two, I cut quality. I usually cannot cut features if you give me a specification because the features are usually pretty clear. What you cannot specify is quality, ease of use, and how you're going to interact with the app afterwards, or how easy it is, how understandable it is, because that is a UX topic and it's mostly a topic that evolves over time in the project. We don't like to do these kind of projects because they always end up a mess. If you buy a fixed price software, be very aware. You either need to be very experienced in doing what you want to do, or you might want to copy something directly. That might be possible if you clearly communicate what you want, which is very difficult. But other than that, you're probably going to end up with a better product if you add a little flexibility to your budget. And then there's long-term costs. Even when the initial development is done, you're not done paying. Because obviously if you run something in the cloud, it will need to be paid for. And second of all, if you had an app created, iOS and Android will move on to the next version. You will have to pay for maintenance if you want to keep your app running. And that involves small and little things. First of all, libraries might get outdated, so we might to switch libraries altogether, or we might to at least update libraries. And if that happens, the entire product needs to be retested, because usually those libraries are interconnected to a lot of things in the project. Then if you had an IoT project and the Bluetooth library changed in iOS, or the Bluetooth library that we used gets outdated and needs to get replaced, that usually ends up in retesting the entire thing. So how do you avoid the sticker shock? Start small. Have an MVP created. Don't try to specify 12 months of development work. Try to give us a 3-month thing. So what features do you really need? Second of all, if you do this, you have the option of launching something to a small user base and testing out the market, gaining insight into how your actual users are going to use your app. If you develop for too long without interacting with users, you might be surprised what is used and what is not used. So it might be a very good idea to start small. Communication is key too. You want to communicate into every direction. You want to communicate with the software development company like us a lot. You want to spend a lot of time with us. And you also want to spend a lot of time with your upper management. You need upper management attention to have those decisions backed up that you make in the project. Also, plan a little flexibility. So if your initial goal was to do something for X dollars, be aware that you will likely add stuff to the project and that you'll probably end up with X plus Y. And again, choose the right partner. Choose someone that speaks your language. Choose someone that communicates correctly. Choose someone that wants to be transparent. Choose someone that you can actually visit. And choose someone that doesn't give you a fixed price, because that's always a lie. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe to the channel. Next time, in the next video, I'll discuss why timelines are so hard. This time it was about budgeting issues and scope creep, but next time we'll discuss timelines and why this is so difficult. Alright, see you in the next one.